Viewpoint program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We've got a politician this morning. We'll get some perspectives. And I'm getting a lot of static over here from my partner. Everybody knows Judith K. Busby. Good morning, Mrs. Busby.
Good morning, Bill.
And how are you this morning?
And thanks for not answering me.
Well, what was the question again, please?
Have I made you angry?
No, not yet. The day's not over.
I'll just keep working at it.
Yes. Go ahead with that question, and then maybe I can answer it.
Well, now I've gotten so upset I've forgotten the question.
Right.
Once upon a time in the big city of Lincoln, Illinois, there was an organization that was begun by a fellow who lived across the street from Bill and me. And it was called Good Government, Better Government?
Good Government Association.
Okay. Yes. And it was a bit controversial, I understand.
We had the witch hunters. We had the witch hunters out. Yes, that was very controversial. Some degree of secretiveness about it. And all in all, the waves washed it away before it's all said and done. But that is there a specific question that you would like to know about that, which I can't answer?
No, I just thought about that because I was reading here about an outfit that's called BigGovernment.com, and I thought, heck, we had something like that right here in River City.
I doubt it.
Not so much?
No, I doubt that. Well, one of the things we always do at Viewpoint, Mr. Flynn, is I always try to come up with something that's happened in the community, some person or organization, and we give them a little kudo, a little shout-out for being good citizens and so forth. Number one, Judith.
Yes.
We'll recall, James, that we've had a considerable debate in the community about whether or not this wind farm is going to come over around Mount Pulaski. The county board voted it down once, not by a resounding majority, unfortunately, but they did vote it down. Now it's being revisited. The Mount Pulaski School Board had the fortitude to stand up and refuse
I heard about that.
the money that they were waving in front of them,
That's
remembering my admonition that all that glitters is not gold. And so kudos to the folks on the Mount Pulaski School Board who had the spine to stand up and say, no, that money is pretty tainted, we're not going to do that. So, yes, Mrs. Busby.
And I applaud that as well, but you have to bear in mind that they were in a position to do that because they got $2.98 with Viper Mines building of the sluice pond or whatever you call it.
I'm not going to get into that. That's a fact. It's here now, so we'll have to accept that. Another thing that happened in our community, typical of small communities, Mr. Flynn, the other day a lady fell on a street corner and hurt her head pretty badly, and it was a young 12-year-old young man, and I didn't say kid for a good reason. He happened to be right there and showing somebody's training and so forth. He was right there, took his shirt off to comfort her head and so forth, and held her hand and talked to her while the emergency people were getting there. That in itself is a neat thing for me to talk about. But what I want to get to is that a young man by the name of Chad Lorenz and many others in the community stepped forward, and they bought that kid a very, very nice, expensive bicycle. So kudos to those folks who stepped up to help young Chad, Kalen Patton. And so kudos to Kalen and all those folks who helped him.
That was really a heartwarming story.
Very neat. Now we have a guest this morning. He's driven all the way here from Burtonview, so
where he flew in.
He flew into Burtonview, Martin International Airport. There. Why don't you introduce our guest this morning? We're very pleased to have him with us.
Yes, direct from Quincy, where Lauren Wallace ended up coaching basketball.
Yeah. You're going to hold that against me?
Not so much. Not so much.
Basketball,
I know.
Mike Flynn is a Republican candidate for Congress, and we're having, of course, the special election on the 7th of July. Please don't forget that. And if you're going to be gone, go up to the courthouse and vote early. Congressman Aaron Schock will no longer be occupying that seat, and Mike Flynn
is no longer.
Right, he is. Yeah, he stepped down at the end of March. He is
right. Gone. Yeah, he is. And Mike Flynn is going to be included in that July 7th primary.
Yes.
So congratulations to you for stepping up to the plate on that.
Thank you very much.
Let's learn.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. It's very nice to have you with us. Let's talk about who Mike Flynn is and what prompted you to throw your hat in the ring. Okay, Mike?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you very much. I am born and raised in Quincy, Illinois. Sixth generation, actually, from Quincy.
Really?
My family moved there in 1870 and started a bottling business.
Of which kind?
A bottling. Soda bottling.
Oh, yeah.
Club sodas, quinine, tonics. In 1905... funny you mentioned that. In 1905, we became one of the first Coca-Cola franchises in the country.
Is that right?
And so we were Coca-Cola bottlers, spread all throughout. Our territory was in west central Illinois, southeast Iowa, northwest Missouri. And that was my background. That's where I grew up. I started working there at about 12 or 13, which is what you do in a family business.
Sure.
My dad only fired me once when I was 13.
Oh, that was lucky.
Yeah, and it also taught me a very good lesson.
Yeah. Well,
Good. We
that's
get
good
those.
parenting.
I in the 90s, I got involved in a little bit in the Republican Party here in Springfield. Worked on campaigns. There was a lot of hope at that time. There was a new legislative map. And there was a lot of hope the Republicans could take the legislature, take over both houses, the House and the Senate, get control. We did, and then they did nothing with it.
Yes.
And lost control. And I spent the next 20 years working in conservative policy development, government reform, working across the country, passing market reforms, reforms for individual responsibility. In the last 7 years, I've been in media. Andrew Breitbart, my good friend, and I founded BigGovernment.com, which was one of the first major conservative online news sites. And we founded that with an expose of Acorn and the hypocrisy and scandal of the group Acorn. And fortunately, they're no longer with us because of that
Amen
expose.
for that.
And I'm running. I never planned to run for office ever. 4 months ago, I would have told you you'd be crazy to think I'd be running for Congress in my home. But I've had growing frustration with the political leadership in Washington, in Springfield. I've never seen such a gulf between our elected officials and the views and sentiments of the people. And I'd helped a lot of people over the years get elected to Congress, and usually they disappointed me. They very quickly went native to D.C. and began to just think about D.C. over their district. And I thought, well, rather than be frustrated and angry, I should do something about it. And step up. Right after Schock announced his resignation, there are a lot of machinations in this area of everybody getting behind one candidate, and they were trying to anoint him without even having an election. They pushed a lot of people out of the race, pressured a lot of people to not challenge him, and I thought that's not how we should be doing things in Central Illinois. We should actually have an election. We should have a debate. We should discuss these issues and let the voters decide, because this is important.
I think that they kind of had that in mind over 200 years ago, don't you think?
I think that's what this whole crazy thing was about.
You're right.
Citizen politicians is what it was called.
It used to be, and something's happened, especially in the last 20 years or so. You know, we're used to government being out of touch with us, but increasingly our elected officials are out of touch with us. They live different lives. They're in politics their entire adult career. In fact, politics is a career for them, which is a very new phenomenon. It was never intended to be a career. I don't consider it a career. And I think when you do think of it as a career, it changes your focus. And I think that's part of what happened to Representative Aaron Schock, is that when it becomes a career, it becomes a vocation, you have different priorities. And the only way to really start changing Washington and changing government is to change who we send there. And if we're just going to keep sending people whose life ambition is to be in politics, we're not going to get out of this.
Well, every word you've said points to the fact that you might have a very definite opinion on the issue of term limits.
Absolutely. I will not serve more than 8 years. It's not that there's a magic to 8 years. It's that if I serve any more than 8 years, I will qualify for a congressional pension. And I think that phrase right there is a large part of what's wrong. There ought not to be a pension for serving in Congress. When you
That's
get
a refreshing statement.
Well, when you get a pension, and think about this as just as a human being. If you have a pension, you want to protect it, you want to enhance it, that's normal.
Oh, yeah.
So the problem is, when you attach a pension to serving in Congress, you act like a normal person. You want to protect it, you want to enhance it, you want to increase it. That's why you can't have a pension. And when there are things like a pension, when there are the benefits you get, when members of Congress are exempt from Obamacare, when they don't have to live by the laws they pass for the rest of us,
right,
it sets up an incentive for them to be there as long as possible. So yes, I believe in term limits, but that alone isn't the answer. If you, say, serve 10 years in the State House, and then 10 years in the State Senate, and then 10 years in Congress, I mean, you've had term limits technically, but you've served 30 years in government. So term limits are part of the answer, but it's just part of the answer, and I do support them. I signed the U.S. Term Limits Pledge. I think I'm the only candidate running that has imposed a term limit upon himself. And that's not just a promise, that is a commitment. Because not only do I not want to qualify for a pension and become a career politician, after 8 years it's time to pass it to somebody else for new experiences, new backgrounds, new ideas.
Isn't that the way it's supposed to work?
That's the way it worked for a very long time. It hasn't worked that way in the last 30, 40 years. And if you look at the outcomes, the last 30, 40 years have not exactly, do not recommend the idea of a professional political class.
Not so much. You talk about protecting your pension, enhancing your pension, and in order to do that, you can always go on and become a lobbyist next.
That's right, yeah.
And there's been some talk lately about the fact that maybe that's not such a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea. And part of the problem you have is that government does too much. You know, the federal government spends over $3 trillion a year. So that's going to attract money. It attracts lobbyists.
Sure.
Everybody wants a stake in how that's spent. And so that's there's going to be, a lot of people are going to want former members of Congress to go and become a lobbyist.
Oh, right.
They play a trick now, though. They don't call it a lobbyist. They'll call it an advisor. Or I'm a senior advisor. I'm a
rose by any other name.
That is the point. It is a rose by any other name. And I think you've got to, I will never do that. I will never do that at all. Whatever you call it, I will not do that. And we've got to hold people account that they will not do that. You know, I don't even know, you know, you might even want to, it's the one tax increase I might ever support is a tax on people who do lobbying and advising. That's the one tax I might want to increase.
You could justify that.
I might,
in a hurry.
You could bend your scruples for that one.
I think that would be a place I would compromise.
There you go, there you go.
Well, I'm sure, go ahead, Judy.
No, please.
I'm sure that as you've worked the hustings here in this 18th Congressional District, you find that because you are not, quote, a mainstream candidate,
right.
You're swimming upstream in a pretty powerful current. What kind of feedback are you getting, Mr. Flynn?
Well, I mean, it's great, and the feedback I get from voters is fantastic, and it's what propels me. I mean, there's 19 counties in this district. It's a lot of territory to cover, a lot of people to talk to. In a short election like this, it is rising before dawn and going to bed long after the sun has set. It's worth it, though, because of the people you meet and the people you talk to. But you are right, there is an uphill battle, and that's with the party establishment. I mean, there are right now the party establishment, the Republican Party establishment, is doing a number of smears on me. There are phone calls being made to voters claiming that I want to ban guns, which I have an A rating from the NRA. It could not be more of a lie. That I'm for amnesty, which is absolutely not true, and all my work at Breitbart shows that. I mean, they're spreading a lot of lies and misinformation. That's because of the stakes in this fight. We, by launching this campaign, are getting in the way of what the establishment wanted. The establishment and political powers wanted to just anoint somebody as the next congressman and move on. You're seeing this in Washington right now, where conservatives are standing up, say, against the trade deal that Obama is pushing, and the Republican leadership there is punishing conservatives and stripping them of their committee positions, throwing them out of any kind of positions of influence because they're standing on their principles. And we're facing the same thing here in Illinois. But fortunately, the voters will have the final say on July 7th. And I believe, and the feedback I'm getting is that voters are tired of this game. They're tired of these political dirty tricks. They're tired of the smears. They want to have a discussion and debate about the issues, and they want to have a role in this process. And that's what this campaign's about. And
should you be successful to represent this district, it isn't as if you were going out to the big belt out there in Congress as a greenhorn. You do have some background in the workings of Washington because you had some experience out there.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time. I mean, when you fight for the last 20 years, as I have, for conservative policies and conservative reform, you're going to spend a lot of time in Washington. I mean, that's where you have to go to have that fight.
And testifying before the very Congress.
I've testified a lot, quite frequently.
Yes. And
so you do know the ropes.
I do, but what else I know is I know the swamp it is. I know the pitfalls. I know how they take good people and turn them into something different, and I know how to avoid all that. I have seen Washington up close. There is nothing to wow me. There are no stars in my eyes about it.
Unless Mr. Smith goes to, or Mr. Flynn goes to Washington. Yeah,
I can assure you, I am probably one of the few people that's become even more conservative the longer they stay in Washington, because when you see up close what happens there, it steals your convictions for the fight we have ahead, and we do have a lot of challenges. What gives me hope, though, is that we've beaten them before, and we can do it again. I remember in the 70s when I was growing up and watching my father struggle to hold a family business together with 24% interest rates, and 13% inflation, and marginal tax rates that were 75, 90%. The Middle East was aflame, just like now. And we got through that.
Well, they've had a war over there since they had enough people to hold one.
But Ronald Reagan, with a strong conservative message, did not moderate, did not shirk from that message, turned it around. And we launched, our country enjoyed one of the largest spurts of economic growth we've ever had, and peace around the world. So we've done this before. We can do it again. We just have to change how we're doing things.
What about some of the social issues, Mr. Flynn? Marijuana, for instance. Legalization of marijuana.
Yeah, I would.
Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it should be decided by the states. You know, I'm a very strict constitutionalist.
Right.
And think the federal government has little role in a lot of these affairs. They are designed to be decided by the states, the people, and localities, not the federal government. The beauty of our system is that you have more freedom because states can explore different laws they want to pursue. I mean, a state like Connecticut does not have to have the same laws as a state like Mississippi. And that's how it should be. You know, I don't support legalization of marijuana, but if a state wants to do that, I think our system allows that. And we should allow that.
We have what's known as station rights here, as well as states' rights. We have to defer to sponsors. So they'll take a commercial break right now.
I love capitalism, so that's good.
And right back live in the studios here. The program is Viewpoint, your program of politicians and perspectives and personalities. We certainly have a personality this morning, and would-be politician, but not in that strict sense of politicians the way some people use that word. Some people use it as a kind of a dirty expression. We won't think of it in this context.
Well, some people have earned that.
We're clean that up. 648-5510. Somebody might have a question or comment to our candidate for the 18th Congressional District, replacing a fellow by the name of Shock, who shocked us all. And our candidate this morning, speaking up there, Bill, to have another cup of coffee, is Mr. Mike Flynn from Quincy. We were talking off air, and I indicated that perhaps we'd comment on tax reform, Mr. Flynn. Go ahead and pick up that ball from that point on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that in Congress, that would be one of my top priorities, because not only do we have a system that's insane, if you think about it, there's no American when they file their taxes that knows 100% they did it right. Right. And that's a crazy system. But it also is keeping back our economic growth. So many of the challenges we face can only be solved if we have economic growth. We are currently stagnating at about a 1% growth rate. Normally, historically, we should be growing 4 or 5% a year. You've got to have tax reform to get there. One thing that I find very interesting is that I'd like to pursue is Hong Kong actually did this really great experiment that worked out, in which they said, okay, you can either, you the taxpayer, decide whether you use the existing tax code with all the credits and exemptions and deductions and all those things, or you can use this flat tax. And you report your income, a basic exemption, and pay 20% tax. But you get a pick. And within about 2 years, they got rid of the existing code because everybody wanted to do the simple flat tax. The problem we have with tax reform now moving forward is that each of those credits, deductions, exemptions has powerful interest behind it. And not just interest people. I mean, there are people who legitimately will say, well, I need the charitable deduction, that's important to me, or the mortgage interest deduction is important to me. And those things are all important, but taken together, they make it impossible to simplify the tax code. So what Hong Kong did, and what I think we should look at, because we have to start looking at new ways of doing things. We can't just keep doing the same old thing, is to say, you, the taxpayer, you make a choice. If those deductions are important to you, you can keep using those and keep filling out your taxes with those deductions. If they're not, or if you just like the simplicity, then use the flat tax. But you get a pick. And I think that's something we have to pursue
If you were a picker, where would you stand on flat tax?
I would pay a flat tax. And even if it ended up I was paying more, I would pay it just to have the certainty, to just know. Because when you don't know if your taxes are right, you're immediately at a disadvantage with the IRS. And everybody in America worries they're going to be audited, or they worry that the IRS is going to call. That is not a place free men should be. Free men and women should not be always worried the government's going to come and audit them, or that their the benefit of a flat tax is not necessarily that you maybe pay less. It's that you know you are obeying the law, you're playing by the rules, and there's nothing government can do or say to you. They have no hold over you. That's the beauty of that kind of system. But rather than the political fight of which one we're going to do, which one we're going to use, and that whole gridlock that comes from that, we just say, okay, look, you choose. You, the taxpayer, choose which one you're going to use. And then we go from there. And we get out of that political gridlock that we're locked in right now.
Well, be it ever this, as far as the political gridlock is concerned. Ron Reagan said it best when he said the government's the problem.
It is.
And now, speaking of government, the problem, we have a large problem on the horizon called Obamacare. Your comments about that, sir?
Yeah, Obamacare, well, first it needs to be repealed, all parts of it. It needs to be ripped out of the federal code, but we need to go beyond that. Obamacare moves us in the wrong direction. But all of our discussions on health care are not really about health care. They're about who's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion. We never discuss the patient relationship with the medical provider. That relationship should be central to our discussion of health care. But instead, we talk about the patient with the insurance company, or the doctors in the insurance companies, or the government and the insurance companies. We talk about everybody else except the patient to the healthcare provider. That needs to become central. One thing, I was in Hopedale recently, touring the facility there with the Rossies, and that's a fantastic facility. I was in Carthage a few weeks before that at the Memorial Hospital there, where they're doing pretty innovative, groundbreaking stuff, like at Hopedale. Like, it's really like new ways, new models for doing healthcare. We need more of that. The problem with Obamacare, and even proposals from a lot of Republicans in Washington, is it is centralizing healthcare decisions. It is trying to make it more, one payer, one provider, one hospital system, one network of doctors. Whereas what we need is millions of clinics everywhere. Most of your healthcare needs, you don't need to go to a doctor or a hospital, or you need a clinic. You need to see a nurse. You need to see a physician's assistant. You can make the choice about what you're doing. So healthcare, we need to actually make it like insurance. I mean, when you have car insurance, you don't expect your insurance to inflate your tires and change your oil and change your windshield wipers. But that's how we look at healthcare.
I'd never thought of that analogy, and that's a good analogy.
I mean, health insurance is supposed to be insurance. It's to insure you for when bad things happen. So you could easily and inexpensively have a catastrophic policy, say, that covers you for major illnesses and serious injury. And then the rest, you should be able to put tax-free dollars into an account and just pay for your day-to-day medical with that. The point is, you are making the choices. You are deciding if you want to spend that money on a yoga class, you can do it because it makes you healthy. If you want to spend it on wellness, you can do it. If you want to spend it on going to the doctor every week, you can do it. It's your money. We need to get to that kind of model. It's a model we use in everything else in our life, except for healthcare, and that's because government's involved in it.
Socialized medicine has not proven to be a panacea for the countries who practice it.
No, the problem with, Margaret Thatcher always, her best line is, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money.
I like that.
And socialized medicine is the same. The real problem, though, is that, again, you're not making the choices. Somebody else is making the choice. And when you have third-party payers, when you have the insurance company paying for health care, or the government paying for it, or socialized medicine paying for it, the person paying for the treatment has no stake in the outcome. They almost don't care whether or not you get better or not. They just have to worry about the cost.
Yeah.
You have to bring those two things together. The person paying has a stake in the outcome.
Yeah.
That's the danger of socialized medicine. And that's where you get what have been called death panels. That's where you get other people deciding, am I going to spend other people's money on this other person for a treatment that has no bearing on my life? And that's when you get cost reductions and cost containments and the decisions that, well, you're too old for a new hip. It doesn't make sense for us. We're not going to pay for that. That's what happens. If you have the money, you can say, I am young enough for a new hip.
There you go.
And I am going to pay for that new hip, and I have the money to do it because we've set up a system that allows that to happen.
648-5510. Our guest this morning at Viewpoint is Michael Flynn out of Quincy, candidate for the 18th Congressional District, which is a pretty big district, isn't it, Mike?
It is, 19 counties. It goes,
this is a special election, folks, to replace our resigned congressional congressional member, and that election is July the 7th. And I want to tell you, folks, it's an important election. All elections, school board elections, they're all important. And unfortunately, the electorate seems to think that, well, things will go along whether I do anything or not or say anything. And that's our one point to where we can have a say-so of what we feel. And in this case, in this district, we're apparently sending Jimmy Stewart out there. Mr. Flynn goes to Washington.
Well, no, I do want to say it is important. We face real, almost existential challenges as a nation. We are losing our stature in the world. Friends and enemies don't know what we believe anymore on the world stage. Yes. We are losing. Our morals are under attack. One thing I learned with Andrew Breitbart is we are in the midst of a culture war, and the left and the media is not just biased against us; they're active belligerents against us, and they are assaulting our values and our culture every day. Our government is growing so enormous it itself doesn't even know everything it does. So we have some real challenges. We have some real fights ahead, and we have to stand up. It is very easy. It is frustrating. Washington is clearly out of touch. Most of the people in Congress are out of touch, and there's not a lot we can do about that. But we can do something here. We can do something in this district, and that's why the July 7th election is so important.
We've got such a whale of a bureaucracy in place. What in the world can be done to whittle it away?
Move them. I mean that, move them. Why do all the federal agencies have to be in Washington? There's no law that says they have to be there. Why not put
I don't think it's in the Bible.
It's certainly not in the Bible. Not even in Romans is there anything about our federal bureaucracy. Why not put the Department of Labor in Detroit? Why not put the Department of Interior in Colorado? And there's a couple serious reasons for that. One is when they're all in Washington, it perpetuates the idea that Washington is distinct from the rest of the country. 8 of the 10 richest counties in the United States are in the Washington area. Think about that.
Scary.
8 of the 10 richest counties. That's over Bel Air, Beverly Hills. I mean, all the places you think of. 8 of the 10 richest are in D.C. Move those bureaucrats out. They all meet all the time and think about new regulations to do.
Right.
But also move them out closer to where the people live, to where their rules are going to have an impact, so they see what the impact is. Another thing we can do that I think is very interesting is Canada, of all places, recently set up a regulatory budget so that an agency in Canada, if they want to propose a new regulation, they have to repeal an existing regulation of equal value.
Mr. Flynn, if I may be so bold, we have a phone call.
Oh, great.
All right, and go right ahead, please, caller.
Yes, I just wanted to comment. I like your healthcare position. I like your healthcare position because me personally, I have MS. I treat my MS from a holistic perspective. However, health insurance doesn't cover it, and it is an expensive ordeal to take on when you do that, because healthcare does not cover a lot of the therapy that I choose to do that helps me. And as an MS patient, I'm proud to say that because I treat my MS holistically, I do not have to take the thousands of dollars worth of shots that most MS patients take every month.
I think the caller makes an excellent point, and this really goes to what I'm talking about, is you put the patient in charge of their health care. That's what we're not doing. the system we have leads to what she faces, in which the insurance company will not cover these procedures. Because again, as I said, they have no stake in the outcome. They're just simply going through a checking the boxes and say, oh, we approve this, we don't approve this. What the caller is talking about is where we need to move on healthcare. And I would hope, if I'm successful July 7th, that we will start to move in that direction. I've worked on healthcare policy for about 15 years, and I'd like to bring that to bear for the residents here.
Well, you know, we worry about bureaucracies beget bureaucracies, and bureaucracies beget waste, and waste begets waste. We have so much cross-reference and cross-responsibilities. It's incredible. We worry about this incredible debt we have that we're leave for generations to come. If they start with waste.
Oh, or start with fraud. The Medicaid system has...
We appreciate your call, by the way.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that call. And that's the kind of thing, that's the one thing that I've really loved about this campaign, is talking to people like your caller. All the solutions to the problems we face are all here. They're all in the American people. We know what we need to do. We know what works because we know what works in our lives. Something happens between us and Springfield and Washington where that common sense gets hijacked and taken by politicians, frankly, who don't understand these issues. Because, again, they live in a separate world and don't face the challenges and choices we have to face every day. And so they just don't understand often what we're even talking about.
Well, and wouldn't that lack of understanding increase with the time that you spend out there?
Absolutely. And also, it's not just the time you spend, it's who you spend it with. Now, the one thing I do want to, you mentioned before my experience in Washington and working these issues, and there's another real benefit to that. Every congressional office gets, I think, about $3 million to run their office, pay their staff and everything. Most of them spend that all in Washington and hire lots of staff in Washington to help navigate the policies. I don't need to do that. I will not have a huge staff in Washington. I don't need to hire a lot of people to explain the policies to me because I've been working on them for 25 years. And if I have a question, I know the independent experts I can ask who are not lobbyists, who are not tied to special interest, who can tell me the policy. The overwhelming majority of that money I receive, I'm going to spend in the district. Staff in the district, offices in the district, to help people navigate the bureaucracy you're talking about, to help people here get the attention of the federal government and say, look, the rule you're proposing is, not only is it going to bankrupt me, it's also stupid. And let me show you why it's stupid. And that's something I think that my campaign is also about. It's also about changing how we're doing these things. Not just have a huge staff in Washington, have a huge staff here to help people, not to glorify somebody in Washington.
You're speaking to grassroots common sense. Basically, that's the common denominator
right.
On this, is stopping to think, where are we going? Why do we have to do this? Whatever the legislation is. Civility is a huge problem out there.
It is.
If you're a Democrat, you're not supposed to speak to Republican or vice versa. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And it's just as bad or worse right down here in Springfield.
It is absolutely just as bad or worse. I'll talk to anybody. And I don't think you should assume anybody is against you on everything. You always have to reach out. You always have to have discussion. I mean, another benefit of my campaign is that living in the world of ideas and in writing, I've written probably 2 to 3 million words on policies and issues and my thoughts. You would know if you read my works, everything I believe, everything I think. I'm not going to give you a line or a soundbite. You'll know where I'm coming from. That's a refreshing change. You may not agree with every part of it, because I don't agree with everything from anybody else. I mean, we always have disagreements. But you'll know where those come from. And you'll know they come from an honest place that is usually almost exclusively grounded in either the Bible or the Constitution. And that's my political philosophy. And you will know it.
And it's just as basic as that.
There's nothing else is necessary.
Yeah, exactly. We appreciate your taking your time this morning. You know, candidates have particularly in this election, that is kind of a short time, they have to spread themselves pretty thin. They have to get out as best as they can to as many people as they can before now on July the 7th. We always try to close the Viewpoint with a comment or two that's hopefully apropos of the subject matter. Get your best hold this morning, folks. This is a Groucho Marx comment.
I love Groucho.
Politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. That's kind of a belated view on politicians.
Yeah, but it's actually, unfortunately, very true.
Thank you, Mike Flynn, very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I enjoyed this.